we're going to look at trig identities. For that, this is what, instead of me writing down all of the trig identities, I want you to go to my website and then look at that page. And I'm going to take you to my website. And we're going to use this page right over here. We go to my website, click on Math 127, trig formula sheet, and that's what we'll be using. So I want you to look at all the trig formulas, and that's what we'll be using over and over again, instead of me doing all of the, writing all of those things down. And today's section is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do some proof. Okay, let's start. So let's establish this identity. An identity. Sine of theta is equal cotangent of theta plus tangent of theta equals secant of theta. To establish an identity, you have to start with one side, preferably the side with more information. So I have sine of theta, cotangent of theta plus tangent of theta. I cannot start with this secant theta. We cannot do that. I'm going to pick one side. I'm going to work with one side and arrive to the other side. So let's look at it. I'm going to distribute this right over here. Sine of theta, cotangent of theta, plus sine of theta, tangent of theta. Let's simplify this a little bit more. Cotangent is cosine of theta over sine of theta. Sine of theta would be sine of theta over cosine of theta. This kind of simplifies. You just get cosine of theta plus sine square of theta over cosine of theta. Well, if I want to combine, it over here. This becomes cosine of theta equal cosine square of theta plus sine square of theta. And we know cosine square of theta plus sine square of theta is 1 cosine of theta, which becomes secant of theta. All right, let's do another identity. This is a little bit tricky one. Cosecant of theta minus cotangent of theta equals sine of theta over 1 plus cosine of theta. Now, this one is a little bit tricky. The reason why, both side has a lot of information in it. So I'm going to pick this side. My goal is to arrive to that side. Well, what can I do? I could rewrite it as sine of theta minus cosine of theta sine of theta. It has the both common denominator. This looks like sine of theta over 1 plus cosine of theta, but it's reciprocal of it, but there's that negative there. So how do we go about doing that? Well, let me multiply the top by its conjugate. if you do that, it becomes 1 cosine square of theta over sine plus 1 plus cosine of theta. Well, what do we know about this part? That's actually sine square of theta. We're going to use a Pythagorean trig identity. And we could simplify that a little bit more. And sine of theta over 1 plus cosine of theta. Do you see this sucker looks like that now? All right, let's do some other proof. This is a hard one. I'll give you a couple minutes for you to try that. Tangent of theta, cosecant square of theta minus cotangent of theta equal tangent square of theta. For this one, you want to start on this side. That's the only hint I'm going to give you. Try it. This is a little bit hard one. So the way we go about doing this, you have sine square of theta, cosine square of theta, but I'm going to rewrite it as cosine of theta. Oops, sorry, no, that's sine of theta over cosine of theta, cosine of theta over sine of theta. This is the part it's gonna confuse you guys right now. We want to combine, we want to get it a fraction over fraction. To do that, so the top part, I'm going to multiply it by what's missing in the denominator. Cosine of theta, cosine of theta. Remember, this is actually in the numerator. And then same thing over here, I'm going to multiply sine of theta, sine of theta. So that becomes cosine of theta, sine square of theta, cosine of theta, sine of theta. And at the bottom, you got sine of theta, cosine square of theta minus cosine of theta. So we have fraction over fraction. Let me use this color to make sure that. When we have fraction over fraction, what does that mean? What the? So you have fraction over fractions. That also, what does that mean? You could just multiply by its reciprocal. Copy. I'm just going to multiply by its reciprocal right over here. Sine of theta, and then sine of theta, cosine square of theta, minus cosine of theta. Wow, this is hard. We're nowhere near close. What can we do? Let's factor out something, what we have over here. Sine of theta, and I'm left with cosine of theta, sine of theta minus 1 over cosine of theta, sine of theta, and I can factor out cosine over here, cosine of theta, I get sine of theta, cosine of theta minus 1. Well, look, you can cancel this sucker with that sucker, and you get sine of theta times sine of theta over cosine of theta times cosine of theta, which is just sine square of theta, cosine square of theta. This is just tangent square of theta. And that's how we arrive to this. That's how we arrive to that final answer. That was very difficult if you see that. That was very difficult. So I'm glad these are videos you can pause and you could rewatch them. Let's do cotangent square of theta equal cosecant of theta minus sine of theta equal sine of theta. Well, this has little information. Let's pick this one. Cosecant of theta minus sine of theta over sine of theta sine of theta minus sine of theta over sine of theta. Well, let's multiply to get the common denominator. I get sine of theta over, oh no, sorry, I made a mistake. This is the denominator, so I have to multiply this side by sine of theta over sine of theta. And I get 1 minus sine square of theta over sine of theta, sine of theta. Well, you know what is this top part? Let's come back to the top part. You know what happens over here. Fraction divided by that, get 1 minus sine square of theta divided by, it just goes down and you just multiply it. And 1 minus sine square of theta is what? Cosine square of theta, which is just cotangent square of theta. That was a hard one. All right, guys, these are my proof for today. If you have any question, email me. Class average, you guys are doing really good. We're gonna have tests in a couple of weeks. We're on track. If you have any questions, reach